Hey guys, just a quick note before we get started here. There's breaking news coming out of Ukraine that I feel the need to address. What appears to be another disgusting NATO US backed false flag. And of course, we have Fox News making the claim that Ukraine says it intercepted communications that prove, they say, Russian backed rebels attacked the city, killing 30. And of course, Fox News, just like CNN, Fox News is just as bad, just as duplicitous as CNN and MSNBC because they will not address this clip coming out of the city in which the attack was taking place in Ukraine. An English-speaking U.S. intelligence asset or U.S. soldier on the ground involved in this nightmarish attack.
On my face, please.
Of course, once again being blamed on Putin and Russia. Now, I wanted to address this head up, A, because it's very important breaking news that won't be addressed by the mainstream Mockingbird media, but also because on this call, Dave talks a little bit about Russia as being a key player in taking us to World War III, and I wanted to draw the distinction for him that Russia is being surrounded by NATO and the United States and appears to be being pushed into World War III. And it turns out that Dave and I do agree, at least in part, about that. So without further ado, here's a very important interview with Dave Hodges from The Common Sense Show.
The upper level of the people like the Rothschilds and the Bank of International Settlement, they want 90% depopulation. They want a global war to achieve this so they can have political reorganization. And when this is all over, and they've got the central banks to war with each other, and it goes nuclear, and you have massive destruction, when they come out on the other side, this is where I think we're going to see the ushering in of things like transhumanism. They want to have a man-machine hybrid, and it'll be the end of the human race as we know it.
Well, friends, thanks so much for taking the time to click play. We appreciate you, and thanks for tuning in. We have back on the line our good friend Dave Hodges from The Common Sense Show. Dave, how are you today?
I am absolutely wonderful, and it's great to be with you.
Well, we're thrilled to have you back. Thanks for taking the time. And when we have Dave Hodges on, it's hard to know where to start because, Dave, you're so skilled at covering everything as we talk about the New World Order tyranny that's got its arms firmly around the globe and the bankster tyranny, the crashing of currencies all over the planet. I think where I wanted to start is with this video that our friend Max Slavo had posted at shtfplan.com. And it's the video of this machete-wielding maniac breaking down the door of James Savengros. And the machete-wielding maniac's name is Twain Thomas. And this man broke down a door, and James was forced to shoot him 3 times to prevent he and his girlfriend from being butchered. The reason I bring that up is not only because our Second Amendment rights are so precious and guns save lives, Dave, as you well know. The reason I bring it up is because I want to use it as a metaphor. The people, the maniacs that are in control of the governments and this planet are like Twain Thomas. They know no boundaries, they will not stop, and they keep coming at us with Agenda 21, with the destruction of our money, with their false flag operations. And we all need to stand up like James, and we need to stop them. Unfortunately, Dave, I don't think the American people at large are prepared to stop any of this. What are your thoughts? Where should we start?
Well, I think you're right, and that's hence the term sheep. You know, there used to be a Facebook page run by Julie Telgenhoff, and she's taken it down, and I'm not sure why, because it was a great page, and it was entitled, "A Sheep No More." And wow, was she really on the money with that? And unfortunately, our people are mesmerized and brainwashed by TV, corporate news, corporate programming. And, you know, it sounds nutty to say this, and I sound like a tinfoil hat person, but I like to watch the premieres of the latest shows coming out for no other reason than I like to see where the New World Order is going to take us. And the trend curve right now on every show, there's a terrorist behind every corner. They're under your bed.
Yep.
They're coming for you. They're going to kill you, and you must be willing to absolutely give up your rights. Torture works. The Constitution is passé. And this is the theme I see consistently across the networks on these debut premiere shows. And the people just are mesmerized by this. You know, the show 24 with Kiefer Sutherland really set the tone for this. Mm-hmm. And it seems like 24 has given birth to a whole forest of shows like this. And the people buy into it. And really the best thing we could do as a nation is to turn off your television.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And as it relates to a lot of those procedural dramas that people seem to like so much, the CSIs and so many of those types of shows. And what's the new one with the gal that used to be on Grey's Anatomy? There's a new one out where she plays sort of a Hillary Clinton type figure. And
Madam Secretary
well, that's one of them as well. And the point
and
is
State of Affairs
state of affairs. That's it.
yeah, I cataloged these the other day, and I wrote just like a one sentence synopsis. I might write an article about this, but it's all the same thing. It's all that you got to let government step outside the law and abuse your rights so they can protect you.
That's absolutely right. And we see it from Hollywood, too, with Clint Eastwood's American Sniper, which I wrote about it early on, because it seems to me that the people are more than willing to have the wool pulled over their eyes, because anybody who wants to take 5 minutes to research Chris Kyle can immediately draw important conclusions. Number one, he lied and slandered and libeled Jesse Ventura, so Ventura sued him in a court of law, and Ventura won. But ironically, before Chris Kyle could show up to defend himself, he was dead, I believe fragged by the Pentagon masters he served. And what I wrote about, Dave, is that we've seen this happen time and time again as the Pentagon gives us implausible, made-up, manufactured stories. About Jessica Lynch, for instance, that she was a hero and that she was saved by a brave team who stormed an Iraqi hospital. Of course, we know none of that was true. The Pat Tillman death, we know that he was fragged. He was murdered by the Pentagon. We know it because his father figured it out by fighting for the truth. And the White House Situation Room photo with the supposed bin Laden raid. There's just so much manufactured news. But why would we be surprised, Dave? Because as you know, this government has now allowed itself to use propaganda against the people domestically without recourse. There used to be a law preventing that, but now they're happy to do it. And what is propaganda? It's psyops. It's psyops. They're using psyops against the American people, and most of our friends, neighbors, and colleagues have no idea that it's happening.
Well, we go back in time to 1999, and I forget the reporters' names because I don't have those notes in front of me, but there were two reporters who went to work for a Florida, I believe it was Tampa Fox News station, and they were brought in as hardcore investigative reporters, and they investigated Monsanto and unsafe practices with regard to milk processing.
Mm-hmm.
And Monsanto got the story killed at the local level. The station editor stepped in and says, no, this is good stuff. We're going to run this.
Mm-hmm.
And then corporate stepped in and fired everybody. So the two reporters and the editor sued in court for violation of whistleblower rights. And also the FCC has a regulation still on the books that if a media outlet like a radio station, newspaper, so forth, has information that could prove beneficial to the public from a health standpoint or a safety standpoint, they are duty bound to report it. And so they sued on those two bases, and they won in the lower court, and they all won a $400,000 judgment. Well, Monsanto, not to be outdone, along with Fox, appealed the decision, and at the District Court of Appeals, the decision was overturned, and the judge said that the corporate news has no obligation to tell the truth. This is where we're at today.
Yeah, and I recall that, and I'm kind of passionate about that story because, of course, Monsanto is behind bovine growth hormone, which finally we hit the tipping point with. And why do I say a tipping point? Well, the tipping point was reached when the majority of the people stood up by no longer buying milk with BGH in it. There was a tipping point reached because even Walmart pulled the BGH milk from their shelves, and so now BGH is very hard to find. And now BGH is no longer, I don't even think, in the milk. We have BGH-free, bovine growth hormone-free milk, because we reached a tipping point where people started to use their pocketbook to fight against tyranny and fascism. We don't want your crappy milk, so we stop buying your crappy milk. And the same sort of tipping point is starting to be reached against Monsanto's GMOs. And we can only pray that we hit that tipping point, because we know that the government is aligned with Monsanto and against the people. They don't want the GMOs labeled. They don't want the people to know the truth. And, you know, I guess that's the very definition of fascism. The definition of fascism is a corporatocracy, an oligarchy working together, government and corporations working together and aligned against the people. That's the very definition of fascism. That's where we are.
Well, no, you're exactly right, and I this is why I love you guys, because you guys, especially at SGT as a whole, you guys are at the forefront of reporting a lot of this stuff. You're absolutely right. There's a universal solution embedded in what you just said. And I've said a lot of the same things myself. Let's go back to the implementation of the TSA, where they get to sexually assault us,
Right.
which is totally illegal and a violation of our Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. But if the flying public would just say, "We're not flying. To heck with you guys," and they go and tell their bosses, "You can't fire everybody. We're not going to fly as long as they do this. We'll ride the bus. We'll drive our car. We're not flying." What do you think the airlines would do with Congress after a week of doing that?
Yeah, they
You think
dismantle
the
TSA
TSA would go away?
pretty quick. Yeah. Well, isn't that the thing too? Because we know, and I knew. Look, even before I knew that 9/11 was a false flag operation, even before I was awake to all of this stuff, when I saw George Bush go on TV and talk about the homeland and talk about developing the Department of Homeland Security, a new apparatus that would be responsible for protecting us against acts of terror and for protecting us and providing security for the people. I at least had a base enough education and knowledge of history, Dave, that I knew that was very Orwellian. I knew it was very fascist in its overtones. I recognized the Nazi-esque terms, homeland. It scared the hell out of me then, especially because I was concerned, even back then, just a short time after 9/11, I was scared about the deficit. I was scared about the trillions in debt. I couldn't figure out why the borders were open. I couldn't figure out, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But now, our listeners, your listeners, people are awake to this fascist oligarchy, this fascist dictatorship. And now people are starting to stand up and fight against it. And that's our greatest hope. Just like the man who had to defend against the intruder who broke down his door and was wielding a machete, had to defend his homestead, had to defend his family. He had to fire 3 shots to put that man down. That was his right to do it. It's our right to do it. It's our right to fight back. It's our right to protect our sovereignty, our liberty, our future from those who want to destroy it. And that's our greatest hope.
The other side are on the attack. You're speaking to someone who's in the crosshairs of the Russian media right now. And I'll go back to about 16 months ago when it first started. And Voice of Russia called me one night. I don't even know how they got my number. They called me at 11 o'clock my time and said, "We'd like to interview you about your views about Russian troops of training on American soil, and they're going to be used as supplemental martial law forces under UN auspices." And I said, "Sure, when would you like to do this?" 5 a.m. tomorrow, your time. Okay. So you want me to get up in less than 6 hours? Okay, yeah. So I went on and I read the bio that they put up before the interview, and I said, "Uh-oh, this is a CNN setup." I'm not bragging, gentlemen, but I have really good research credentials. I've written a statistics class that's still in use at a college, even though I no longer teach there. I've taught graduate and undergraduate research protocols for capstone projects for master's degree students. I know research, I know how to do research, I know how to teach it. They didn't mention one word about my academic credentials. They just said Dave Hodges, the host of the Common Sense Show. And I've been on enough mainstream interviews and been burned that I kind of recognize when I'm being set up. So I knew it was Pierce Morgan versus Alex Jones. And I went on that interview that was scheduled to last 20. They only kept me 10, and I didn't let the host get a word in edgewise. That's not my style, but I knew what I was in for, and I had to make sure that I got everything in. Well, we got into a war of words, Voice of Russia and I. They labeled me in the program post description as an extremist, and were very insulting. And so I went to attack on my website. And they wrote to my website, and I published what they put. And they said, "Well, we are state-owned media, but we don't always do propaganda." I almost choked on my laughter. Well, this has continued with me and the Russians for the last 16 months, and it's gotten worse.
Well, let me ask you.
I'd like to just let me close this one thought. This week, I started writing about 30 things Putin's doing to prepare to win World War III, and we're not doing anything. And it was a preparedness article, not a propaganda, not a moral high ground argument. And all of the trolls came out of the woodwork. And I got threatened, and seriously threatened. So I invoked one of my military resources. He said, give me some IP numbers. And he traced them to TASS, to Pravda. So now they've taken to not attacking me in their media. They're sending trolls to my website and to my email, and they're issuing threats against me. Um, Gentlemen, we're headed for World War III, and if you'd like to go there this morning, we certainly can. And the Russians are trying to obscure every step of the way on what they have planned.
All right, well, I do want to talk about that because it gets so deep into the weeds that it will probably require at least 30 minutes of discussion. But let me ask you this first. Based on your article, the one you're referring to, Russian propaganda is turning into Russian assassination, I just want to quote you, and you wrote, generally, the independent media is under attack because many of us are squarely over the target taking flack, all because we are reporting exactly what is happening as it is happening. We in the independent media are not CNN, Fox News, or other corporate-controlled media which are owned by 6 corporations that represent the tip of the bankster empire that has hijacked our government. End quote. I could not agree with you more, Dave, and in fact, that's why SGT Report is called the Corporate Propaganda Antidote. Now, I want to just explore a little bit about this alt-media angle before we talk about the Russians. Here are just a few recent facts about which I think everyone is well-versed. The 29-year-old director of Gray State, his wife, and 5-year-old daughter were found dead in their Minnesota home weeks after Christmas when they were said to have been missing for a couple of weeks, and we are told it was a murder-suicide. The unexpected death of Breitbart. The unexpected murder of Michael Hastings. Recently, journalist Barrett Brown was sentenced to prison for exposing government corruption. He faced 105 years in prison. He was sentenced to just over 5 years. All over the internet, people who have exposed the Charlie Hebdo false flag operation have had their videos taken down. A video we produced ourselves, Dave, was taken down as we dissected that event. The point is that all over the world, certainly in this country, real journalists are being attacked, if not outright murdered. So let's talk about that, because you're mentioning the Russians. I would like to, of course, talk about that, but I want to point out that it's NATO and this criminal government that is surrounding Putin, that is rabble-rousing in Ukraine, that is toppling leaders, putting in puppets, and seems to be leading us off the cliff to World War III. So
I agree.
Okay, so
I
with,
agree.
with all
If
of
I
that,
were to- if
with
I
all
were
of
to-
that said, just help us frame up why you're saying Russia specifically is sort of the bad guy in Russian media here, or are you saying that they're just part of this larger plan to take the world to World War III?
Yes, the latter. Absolutely.
Okay.
If I were a judge in ascribing liability here, I would say 65% Western banking, American media, and American politicians at the upper levels. And I'd say 35% the Russian oligarchy. And this is how I see it. The percentage is really kind of irrelevant because Putin and Obama work for the same people, whether they're aware of it, whether the people are aware of it. We are in a collision course towards World War III. And let me just back up, and I'm going to give you a macro view of what I've come to the conclusion of. And as far as I know, I'm the only one writing about this. So either I've kind of stumbled into something new or I'm loony, and I'll let you guys be the deciders. But I look at the epic of economic and somewhat political power on this planet as residing in the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and manifesting in the Bank of International Settlements, because they issue edicts all day long to the central bankers that control nations about how they conduct their business. Also, I found that the credit swap derivatives that has bankrupted every modern nation on the face of the earth with $1.5 quadrillion of debt, that's 16 times greater than the world's GDP, that came out of the Bank of International Settlements. And what's happened as a result is that the central banks and their financial institutions, like for us on Wall Street, are so far in debt they have to go predatory. This is why I believe we have the MERS mortgage fraud, why we obviously had the bailouts, why we're going to have the bail-ins. It's stealing from the citizens. And when these central banks run out of money to plunder from their citizens without pushing them into revolution, then they have to get predatory towards each other. So what have the Russians done? Because the Russians are caught up in the fallout of all this. They attack the petrodollar by getting Iran to sell oil for gold. We've retaliated with going after Ukraine and affecting Russia's natural gas shipments. And then we've plunged the oil prices to where Putin is having to go into his reserves, as well as the other BRIC nations. This is why we're on the precipice of war. People don't understand the banking hierarchy. The upper level of the people like the Rothschilds and the Bank of International Settlement, they want 90% depopulation. They want a global war to achieve this so they can have political reorganization. And when this is all over, and they've got the central banks to war with each other, and it goes nuclear, and you have massive destruction, when they come out on the other side, this is where I think we're going to see the ushering in of things like transhumanism. And what I offer as proof is the planet is being terraformed. And if you look at the Gulf oil explosion, I wrote an 8-part series about how it was planned, and I have irrefutable proof. Mm-hmm. And the Gulf stream is no longer working properly like it used to because of the explosion. And Europe is going to be plunged into an ice age in the next 30 years. You've got the Atlantic greatly affected. You've got Fukushima that's poisoning everything in the Pacific. The radiation's affecting the planet. We've got the chemtrails. I could go on and on and on. But we are seeing a fundamental transformation of man and man's planet, the planet Earth. And what's going to lie after all this reorganization takes place? Well, they write about it. It's transhumanism. They want to have a man-machine hybrid, and it'll be the end of the human race as we know it.
Yeah, I'm nodding in agreement. I don't know if people are aware, one of the first microdocs I ever did for my YouTube channel was called Revelation 8, Gulf Oil Catastrophe. And we've covered the chemtrails and the geoengineering topic in some detail at SGT Report 2. I think people that understand sort of the hierarchy of the problems that we're facing, and they understand how evil the bankers are, Dave, and how many decades and centuries this control system goes back. When you talk about the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, when you talk about the Vatican, when you talk about the monarchies in Europe, I think people who are aware well understand that Bill Gates and Carlos Slim and Warren Buffett are not the world's wealthiest men. That's one lifetime of wealth. We're talking about multi-generational banking wealth. And those people have taken control of all the major systems, of all the major corporations, and they are unfolding, I think, what you are describing as a transhumanist future in which they will control everything with an iron fist, and any humans that are allowed to survive at all will be nothing more than slaves. And I've often said, Dave, if you want to know what the future looks like, take a look at the first couple minutes of Terminator 2. Yes. Take a look at those robots on the ground and the Skynet robots in the sky destroying everything in sight with absolutely no ability for frail human beings made of skin and bone and flesh to fight back. That's the future that these people want to unveil and take us towards.
Well, that's, when you work in this long enough and you have a million dots up on the wall, a picture starts to emerge.
That's right.
And you just, and I really can't imagine anything else being the same. I'll tell you what some people come at me with, and I reject this respectfully, but the transformation of this planet, the terraforming, if you will, some people say, well, they're preparing for aliens to come here and take over, and it's kind of like the movie Arrival with Charlie Sheen, and it was an interesting movie, but I don't need to go to ETs to explain what's going on. What I'm seeing going on right now is the global elite want to have immortality, and transhumanism by creating a human-machine hybrid is the way they think they can do it. They plan on dumbing us down, shortening our lifespan for the 10% of us they expect to let live, and then we will be their servants. It'll be absolute slavery on this planet. And humans, as we know it in their present form, we might be a generation or two away from being the last pure humans on this planet.
Now, for anybody who thinks we're nuts, I just want to go a little bit outside the boundaries of what we might normally talk about and draw people's attention to CERN's Large Hadron Collider, the largest and most powerful particle accelerator, which started up on the 10th of September 2008 and remains the latest addition to CERN's accelerator complex. If anybody has ever imagined what it might look like to move into this brave new future where a break-off piece of our society, the aristocracy, so wealthy and in so full control of the military and governments, could then slice off and start to work on their own projects where they might propel themselves into a future where they leave us behind. Take a look at the secret space programs. Take a look at the Large Hadron Collider. I think the Large Hadron Collider is one of the most mysterious things going on in the world today. Dave, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but stick with me. It's because They said they were looking for the God particle. So, Dave, my point is I think that the powers that be are up to a lot of mysterious secret stuff, like secret space program and secret weapons and secret projects and black projects that humanity is not privy to. They're moving forward as a Type 1, Type 2 civilization, and they're going to leave us behind.
Interesting you use the Michio Kaku terms of Type 1, Type 2. Okay, here's a bombshell for you. And what you're saying is right, and people that raise their eyebrows at you should be embarrassed that they're not educated. My father worked on the secret space program. He was retired from the Navy with full pension 6 months early after he had installed the first nuclear missiles, or was in charge of it, on the ships in the Navy, primarily the carrier Roosevelt. And he went to work at Martin Marietta, working with German scientists. And what they perfected was vertical liftoff craft, like the traditional TV sci-fi UFOs that you see. Well, that stuff you see flying around is our stuff. And we've been in space a lot longer than NASA. There's the public NASA program. There's the private program. And see, I've known this stuff since the 1980s when my dad confided in with me when he was terminally ill. But I couldn't release it because my mom was going to get his captain's pension. And if I would have said anything, the Navy could have come in and taken the pension. So I had to wait until my mom passed. And then I started singing like a canary. In fact, I did share this with a couple people. Jim Mars got wind of this through one of my CIA contacts that was the husband of my news director. And they flew Jim in to meet with me, oh gosh, probably 6 years ago. And that was 3 years before my mom passed. And I gave Jim everything. And it verified a lot of stuff he was able to uncover. But now I'm starting to talk about this openly. Guys, we've been in space since the late 1950s. This Sputnik stuff and John Glenn, 3 orbits, that was all for theater. That was the public space program. We have totally militarized space.
Well, Dave, I think we're both very much in agreement that there are secret projects going on that would probably really shock and defy most people's understanding. And I just want to read this just to come full circle on the Large Hadron Collider, because I think it's amazing that, humanity can't seem to stop itself from endless wars, right? We can't stop fighting with each other for centuries and centuries and centuries. We know, as our friend Mike Rivero says, all wars are bankers' wars. But it's amazing to me, Dave, that although we can't stop these bloody, senseless wars, and they will not let us live free and aspire to what humanity can ultimately aspire to become, they've created this Large Hadron Collider, and let me read this for folks. The Large Hadron Collider is the largest machine in the world. It took thousands of scientists, engineers, and technicians decades to plan and build, and it continues to operate at the very boundaries of scientific knowledge. The fact that science can come together and build something like this, Dave, I think is a testament to what humanity is capable of. But again, I think your point and my point is that they are doing these things without us. And the knowledge they gain from these things, they will use for themselves. They are not going to include us in this glorious future that humanity could have. They're going to move forward without us.
Well, they're going to use this to enslave us and actually to depopulate us as well.
Yeah. Well, why don't we do this? It's such a complex call with so many different topics we've hit on. Let's just wrap it up here with a discussion about World War III. How do we avoid World War III? How do we avoid these bankers, again, taking us off the precipice, taking us into conflict and war with Russia and with China, with the BRICS nations? How do we prevent the people in control of our own government from taking us off the precipice into World War III? How do we prevent ourselves from annihilation? What do we do, Dave?
I think the only way that we stop it is for the American people to wake up and speak with one voice and say, we know what you're doing. I mean, ISIS is a CIA creation. The army is armed by weapons we illegally left behind when we vacated Iraq. And of course, ISIS is this thing that sprung up out of nowhere, a CIA creation. They're into Syria, and their job is to unseat Assad, but they can't do it by themselves. They need the help of the American military. So ISIS is going to create enough, shall we say, human rights violations that the American boots on the ground will follow to stop ISIS, but the real goal will be regime change with Syria. And Putin has made this clear. If you go in to Syria, it will mean nuclear war. He has threatened to nuke us on 2 different occasions, as has the Chinese. This will be the trigger point for World War III. The only way to stop it is for the American people to let the government know, we know what you're doing and we're not buying it. Because it worked before. 18 months ago, the Syrian rebels were framed for using, or the Syrian government was framed for using gas on the Syrian rebels. And the American people said, we don't buy it. You don't have the proof. And McCain and Obama had to tuck their tail and run. We need to do the same thing again.
Well, that's absolutely right. Well, no truer words have ever been said, and Dave Hodges is one of those folks whose work we post every single day at SGT Report. He definitely digs deeper than a lot of folks, and, frankly, guys, he heads in directions that sometimes ruffle feathers because he is truly trying to dig for truth and find truth wherever truth takes us. And, Dave, for me personally, I really respect and admire that. So thanks for taking the time today.
Well, I appreciate that, and just want to remind the listening audience that they can listen to me every Sunday evening from 9 p.m. to midnight Central. Now, I have a new home. I've gone independent, and I've got my own radio network. We're entitling it the Pioneer Media Broadcasting Company. The Common Sense Show is the flagship show, and we're adding other talk show hosts. But my show is 9 to midnight Central, and the easiest way to find me is just to go to my website. And I've got an icon on the upper right-hand side of the website. It says Listen Today, has the times. Click it on, and there it will be. And we have some of the best guests out there, and we would invite everybody to come and listen.
Well, absolutely. Guys, be sure to check out Dave's work at thecommonsenseshow.com. And, of course, you can see his work every day at SGT Report as well. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for supporting us at sgtreport.com and thelibertymill.com, where we try real hard to bring you real news, the antidote to corporate propaganda, 24/7. Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate your time.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.